What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator David Andry. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And I'm excited. I feel like we've followed each other on socials for quite a while.
It's like, how have I not been on this show already?
Right? Because I do feel like I found your book Resonant early
Yeah.
on in like the COVID days. I'm pretty sure. I want to say, was it Bruce and Stephanie, their channel that we're always talking about Resonant?
Yeah, Bruce and Stephanie were
Yeah.
like the very first ones that jumped on that, and they were just like crazy supportive of that book. They've probably bought almost, as many books as almost everybody else combined, and t-shirts. They bought a ton of Resonant t-shirts. They're probably responsible for 99% of the Resonant t-shirt sales when those were up on the Vault site, and I'm probably responsible for the other 1%. And they would give it away to listeners, and
Yeah.
they talked about it constantly, and I'm like, it was my first book, so it was such a weird, like very cool kind of surreal thing. And yeah, Bruce reached out to me, and he was like one of the first social media podcaster type people to reach out and say, "Hey, you want to be on my show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Someone wants to talk to me." And so like I was his first, like, I think, guest ever on his show, and then I think it was like my first interview ever. So it was really, I don't know, it was very cool, and they've just been supportive like through the whole thing. And I got to hang out with both Bruce and Stephanie this last year at New York Comic Con. We went to dinner together and stuff. So
Nice.
I mean,
I
it was rad.
ran into Bruce at Terrificon one time. So it's cool to see, like, again, this was a connection that I knew of you. We kind of knew of each
Yeah.
other from hanging out in the chats from 2020. And here we are, 2024. You've had a lot more comic series. I've had a lot more interviews, and we finally are making the chance that we get to sit down and talk comics.
I love it. I love it.
So we talked about briefly real quick about Resonant, but before we hop into your comic writing, have you always had a love for comics, or did this just something kind of come later in life?
I mean, no, I started like 1986 reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think number 4 or something like that. My a kid had transferred to my school. I went to a very, very small private, like, Catholic grade school. So there was like 28 or 30 kids in my class, and like 12 of them were guys. And so like a new kid moved in to our town, like came to school like in 6th grade, and he sits down and pulls out from his backpack this stack of comics, and I'm like, what is this? And like, yeah, it was like Teenage Mutant Turtles as it was coming out, the original series. And so luckily we had a really awesome comic book shop in where I grew up in Manteca, Comic Dreams, and the owner there, Randall, let us as kids just loiter. I mean, we literally hung out, and like me and my friend Jim Lopes, we hung out and just read comics. And then he would have like a monthly, we were in a comic club where you got your pull box and stuff like that. And then once a month he would close the shop early, and you would have a party for just the club members. And part of the party, you'd have pizza and movies and stuff like that. And he'd have a sale. It'd be like 50-60% off all back issues. So you would just, as a kid, go and just stock up, because you're like, there's years of Spider-Man, years of like Batman, years of all these comics to catch up on. You just buy a ton of $1 back issues, and come home with like a shopping bag full of stuff and just dive in. So yeah. I read comics pretty consistently all the way up through the early 90s, and then went to college and ran out of money. And so and like right in the early 90s, when it was the big image explosion, they did a bunch of talent searches, and you would hear these stories of like this guy winning a talent search, and now he's drawing Wildcats or something. I did a bunch of those, like trying to write scripts and stuff like that. Got a couple of cool rejection letters that were like personalized, and I'm like, yes, they read it and they didn't like it. I had a friend who was an artist, and we wanted to do comics together, and so that kind of lasted for a little while, and then went away to college, and kind of, ran out of money and fell off of comics for a good decade. And then a friend of mine, Sean Kirkham, who's known as Big Clutch on the internets. If anybody who buys or sells comics is going to know who Big Clutch is, he started working for Skybound, and I started volunteering at Skybound booths during like the big conventions. And so to work the Skybound booth, I felt like I had to get back into comics and like read all the Skybound titles, which was Walking Dead and Invincible, basically.
Oh,
And
so
and I'm
difficult.
like, you're
Oh,
like,
if
I'm
I
like,
must.
oh wow, this is where comics is at now,
Right.
and I'm like, and that, if you're gonna get back into comics, what a way to come back into the best titles like ever. And
Yeah.
so, I devoured 5, 6, 7 years of Walking Dead, 5, 6, 7 years of Invincible, and just got addicted hard back into comics.
Yeah.
And then the being around creators, at the booth, and we were connected to the image booth, and all the like so many comic creators are cool and welcoming and like want to help people like who have dreams of getting in. I'm like, yeah, I used to want to write comics, and like, I'll do it. I'm like, what do you mean do it? Like, you just start writing. I'm like, what? And started writing comics and self-publishing, and then that led to Resonant.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love hearing kind of how to get back in the comic stuff because I kind of got out of comics, but I was still picking up like some trades here and there. But the Walking Dead trades, those hardcovers were ones I kept getting are good ones to keep you connected to comics.
Right, yeah. And to bring you back in, I mean,
Yeah.
two of the best series ever, and I'm a huge I was probably a little bit bigger of an Invincible fan than the Walking Dead fan
Okay.
because, coming from where I was before, I was all superheroes, and
Yeah.
then like, getting that and like, wow, this is what superhero comics could be. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And the Comic Con conventions you mentioned, like the community at those are really cool. I've been on both sides of the table of
Yeah.
being a fan, being an interviewer. I've actually I've actually sat on the other side of the table helping sling books with your letterist, Justin Birch. So,
Oh yeah, just as awesome.
so I've been on both sides of the table.
Yeah, I like it better on the back side of the table. It's less hectic, less
Yes.
crowds. I can get snacks when I want them, and
Right? It's
yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, but I mean, we started. Skybound started when the show was announced,
Mhm.
and that San Diego that it was announced that it was coming out in October. Walking Dead was the thing of San Diego Comic Con,
Yeah.
and so like to be the center of this like whirlwind of excitement for comics, you just got like caught up in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really really cool.
I realized we mentioned Resonant, but even introducing you, I didn't talk about any of the other comics that you are working on. Morningstar, you got Crush Depth, like all these things. And I want to get into your comics here, but how did that transit? You said Resonant was your first comic and kind of going
Right.
from working the booth with your buddies at Sky. But how did it get into, okay, this is something I want to pursue and creating a comic?
Yeah, there was a bunch of stuff that kind of came together. I talked a lot to Jim Zub, who was doing Skull Kickers at the time, and Jim has a ton of resources for people who want to do comics. He has great stuff on his website. He has like a Patreon where you can get like all of his scripts and stuff. So I really talked to him about like the mechanics of it, and like he was running a little contest at the time to do a backup story in one of his books. And so I'm like, oh, cool. I'll write a little script. And like he gave me some encouraging stuff for that. He's like, I kind of know you, so I don't think I should have you win. I'm like, that's cool. I get it, bro. And and Cena Grace, who was Robert Kirkman's editor, he was actually the person that got Sean and me into working the booth at Skybound to even begin with. He was super encouraging about that too, about like writing scripts and taking a look at stuff I've written. And I happened to be going through a divorce at the time, and I'm like, I just got inspired to like put some emotions down on paper so I didn't have to deal with them. So the first comic I wrote was it's just a relationship drama,
Mm.
and so it was basically like my therapy on a page. And because I had worked all these cons, I'd met artists and people that could help me like put a book together. And I reached out to an artist, Paul Schultz, who I had met in Toronto,
Mm.
and just a great, super nice guy. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll draw your comic." And we came up with the page or super low page rate. Thankfully, I think because he lives in Canada at the time, it it worked out well for both of us. And so I just self-published, and then yeah, you get hooked.
Yeah.
You get hooked on that, and like I really just you put that first book out there, got some good feedback, and got some positive response, and it's a pretty powerful drug. And so I
Yeah.
just wanted to get back in and do as much as that as I can.
Yeah. I want to continue digging into the process of, kind of how you got into it and, kind of peeling back the layers. But before we do, I want to jump in real quick because if people have been listening, you have a new book coming out from Mad Cave Studios called Crush Depth, correct? Uh,
Yes,
and so I want to kind of hit on that a little bit, what that is, and then we kind of maybe peel back some layers through that.
sure.
So if someone hasn't gotten to hear about that book yet, what's your elevator pitch for it?
I mean, if you want to do like the one thing is the one and the one thing together, it's like the thing and the abyss, or it's body horror on a submarine. So it's this kind of bleak future where these people are surviving an environmental catastrophe apocalypse by staying in this super high tech nuclear sub. And they don't have to surface and go up for air. And that's good because the air is supposedly poisoned and diseased, and viruses have been released from, melting ice, and environmental catastrophes have made things basically poison on the surface. And so we follow this crew as they discover another ship, and they think they're all alone. But the ship is wrecked, and they want to find out what happened. They get some samples from the ship, and whenever you bring something back, um, yeah, rough stuff's going to happen. So, yeah, then we get into the crux of the body horror and the things that happen on this isolated, contained ship. So it's definitely got, elements of Alien in it. Definitely it's got aliens of Annihilation. A lot of the thing, basically everything that is completely terrifying to me. And we stuck it in one book. My
Yeah.
co-writer Tim Daniel and I both have very similar, like just our brains work very, very similar when we think about things that scare us and what kind of stories we want to tell. So um, yeah, I figure it's a it's a good story for the time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny whenever you talk about the one thing and the other thing. Whenever I see a submarine story, I always imagine Sequest in my mind. So I'm like
There you
comparing
go.
Sequest and Alien.
Yes. Yes,
Just
it's if that dolphin on Sequest was real messed up.
yes,
That is
that's
one messed up dolphin. Yes.
Darwin is really messed up, and
Yeah.
they.
Something's wrong with Darwin, guys.
Oh man. So because literally, and if it is submarine, I'm like, oh, this is Sequest vibe. Not at all, but that's how my mind operates because I
Yeah.
love that shit show as a child. So you mentioned co-writing this book. You and Tim have co-written a couple books together. What? Tell me about the process for co-writing because you didn't co-write Resonant and stuff like. How is that changing for you?
Yeah. It was kind of during the pandemic, everyone's reaching out for someone, right?
Yeah,
And you just want to have someone to be, I don't know, creative with,
yeah,
and someone to like share, the burden a little. And we had been friends. Tim was a Skybound employee, so that first convention, it all goes back to Skybound. Basically, he had been doing their graphic design and their logos and stuff like that. And Tim was at that first convention when we were totally overwhelmed with the popularity of our booth and
Mm.
had we're not really super prepared, and he was there just for fun. He was there just to check it out, and he gave up his entire convention to help us run the booth. And I'm all like, this dude's cool. This guy did not have to do this. He's like, this is not what he's here for. So me and Tim have been friends for 10, 11 years, and he's also very successful writer before we started writing together with The Plot and The Curse and Burning Fields, and was one of the founders of Vault. And him and Adrian Wassel and Damien Wassel happened to live in Missoula, Montana together, and they ran into each other at a comic book convention there. So that's how I had one of my ends with
Yeah.
Vault. I actually had met Adrian and Damien when they were doing their own self-published comic CME, at their very first convention. I met them at their very first convention, like doing that. So when people say how do I break in, I'm like, well, you can try to follow my path, which is hang out at comic book conventions for 10 years, meet as many people and hopefully one of them can lead you to something.
Hey, of all the advice I've heard, that might be the most fun advice, because at
Right.
least if you don't get in, at least you're hanging out at comic book
Right.
conventions.
Right. Yeah, so I think Tim reached out and said, like, hey, you want to work on something together? And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're awesome. Why wouldn't I want to work on something with you? And then like the nerves kind of set in. It's like, I don't know how much of a co-writer I could be. I like my ideas. I think I'm pretty smart, and the stuff I write, I want to write about. And we just happen to mesh perfectly. Like our ideas of what comic books should be is the same. We're both trying to put personal experience, emotional heart into every single thing that we put out there. We want our comics to stand the test of time. You could pick them up in 20 years and read them, have them just as impactful as if you read them on the first day that they came out. Neither of us are super like obsessed with making things that are popular, which might be detrimental to our business side of it. But it's not something we ever talk about. Like, oh, how is this character going to be really the most popular character ever, or whatever? It's we're not really trying to chase trends or make something that we think about the audience too much.
Yeah.
If it entertains us and if we like it and if we put our hearts into it, we assume people are going to connect with it. And I think the fact that we have the same philosophy about our writing and comics and what we want them to be, I think is the most important thing, because you can disagree about story and plot, and that's easy to resolve. But if you're
Yeah.
coming from two different places on what you want the final product to be, there's no way it would work. And because we were friends for so long, it was pretty easy to be very open and vulnerable, because it may not show and it may not say directly on the page, but a lot of this stuff that we're putting into our books is coming from our most deepest like fears and insecurities and faults that we have found in ourselves, and you put those into your characters to make them real and fully realized. And so like we have to be able to discuss literally anything, and like the things that we think are the worst about ourselves, our worst experiences, the worst day you've ever had, the worst thing you think about yourself, everything that you think is terrible about yourself. You have to be open with that co-writer and put it into the book.
Mm.
And so that stuff was came out pretty easily for us, and there was a level of trust and friendship there already, and we know that like the friendship comes before the writing. And so we're never going to disagree to the point where like if it doesn't work between that with that project, we let the project go instead of letting the friendship go.
Yeah.
And then what's what ended up being super cool is the way that we work is is different enough that I say all the time, we each do the part the other person doesn't like. or we do the part that the other person isn't good at. Like Tim is great at coming up with like the initial ideas and like and then shooting it out into a million directions and coming up with all these like, oh, and this could be a sequel, or this could happen, and this could happen. And I'm really good at taking one step at a time and saying, okay, well, this is page one, panel one. This is page one, two, panel. I can get in there and I kind of think of him as the architect and me as like the builder.
Yeah.
And 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 Tim's really, really selfless when it comes to his collaboration. And I think it's because he's collaborated so long in comics, in other jobs, like as a designer and stuff. He gets ideas that he loves and he gives it to a client. And they say, I don't like this. And he's got to be able to pivot and change. And so he'll shoot out 1,000 ideas and I'll go, no, 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 no. Yes, I like that one. And then move forward. And so it actually made our both of our writing much, I think, stronger, but
Yeah.
also faster. So like it's obviously if you have two people doing the same job, it should go faster than one person. But if you're always butting heads and stuff, that it can actually drag you down. And we don't seem to have had that with any of our projects. And we've come up with 10, 15, 20 ideas, concepts, pitches at this point, and
Yeah.
it's been really, really cool.
So you mentioned that you come up with all these different concepts and pitches, and you and Tim have worked on a handful of books before, like Morningstar. There was another one before that with Vault, wasn't there?
We did End After End was our first one,
Okay.
and then we did Denizen, which was part of Nightfall double feature. And then we did a creep show with Skybound. So I had a little full circle moment with Skybound. So that was
Yes.
pretty rad to get my Skybound check in the mail. And then they sent a check. I'm like, I'm keeping this check forever. Uh, and then Morning Star with Mad Cave, and then Crush Depth with Mad Cave, and then at least one more with Mad Cave after that.
Right. So where do you figure out like which idea that you have? How do you figure out which one's going to be something that you create and dig into?
Yeah, it some of it came from like um artists that wanted to work with us, or
Mhm.
that, for example, we had a publisher reach out. This is a non-announced project yet, but we had a publisher reach out. We want this artist, and we're like, okay, what's kind of a cool idea with that person's style? Which one of our projects fits with that? Um, it really just is like, hey, which one had so much momentum, and each person thought about it so much that we couldn't stop working on it.
Yeah.
When a lot of our stuff, we just developed it in. So we spent about a year once we started talking, just developing projects and pitches and ideas. And like Tim has an endless vault of stuff that he started and said, oh, I had this idea. So we'll be talking, and I'm like, got any ideas for? And he's all, no, not really. And I'm like, well, what if we do this? What if we do? He's all, well, I got this one, and it just that bin is never ending for him. So some of the stuff came up, like End After End. We wanted it to be something neither of us had, and we completely developed it together from the ground floor up. Um, uh, Crush Depth was based on a little idea that he had that was with a submarine with two brothers, and that's about. I think there wasn't much more meat to it than that, but he had a general concept of
Yeah.
what he wanted it to be, and then we develop it together. Some of it starts with an idea I have and give to him, and so we just kind of go. We're all over the place, and it'll be something where we're working on End After End, or we're working on Crush Depth. He's all, you know what I can't stop thinking about? I can't stop thinking about this. And I'm like, cool, let's work on that for a little bit then.
Yeah.
And I got stuff like that too. Like I got this idea that we haven't pitched yet that I think we're gonna pitch out pretty soon. That the day he told me about it, and I'm like, stop talking. He said like three lines. I'm all, stop talking. I want to work on that right now. And that's like one that I keep pulling every time I have a free moment. I pull that one out and I work on that one. So It just kind of goes like that. It's like whatever idea we're passionate about at the moment, let's work on that. And um, once something gets picked up, of course, then
Yes.
we focus on that, get that thing banged out, and yeah, and then we can go back to just daydreaming and grabbing whichever project we want to work on at the time.
It seems like a handful of the projects that I've read of yours are like Resonant and Morningstar and Crush Depth. You kind of seem to gravitate towards sci-fi horror kind of. Is that something that is a love for you, or is that just something that kind of comes naturally in the writing process? That you,
Well, I did not know that Resonant was a horror story, a horror comic. It got put. I see it as a post-apocalyptic, which I
yeah,
think of his own genre. And then, I was I was showing my wife pages and like, well, you have a person ripping their own like eyeballs out here, and like this is obviously horror, you idiot. I'm like, oh, I guess it is. And I never thought of like, Jaws is a shark movie. Aliens is an alien movie, but they're also horror. So I think I gravitate towards something that has a lot of tension.
mm,
Usually sci-fi, would be, I think, my genre, sci-fi and fantasy. Um, you know, but usually some level of, grounded horror in there. And
yeah,
and yeah, you know, you kind of get labeled, you do a couple of horror books and you're the horror guy. I'm like, okay, there's good and bad to that, right?
right.
People are reaching out for horror pitches. They come to me. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really a horror person. But I'm like, I'll pretend to be one on television. So, so, but Tim is much more of a horror, guy than me. So a lot of his pitches have a horror element to them. Um, but our next one is pure sci-fi, and
Yeah,
it's like space opera sci-fi. So it's that we have a lot of a range in our stories. The thing that doesn't usually change is a strong emphasis on character and heart and meaning and like a lot of depth, hopefully, to what we're trying to say in the books, and not just like, hey, this is some cool stuff that happened.
yeah. How is it for you with like creating characters where you're taking assuming personal stuff and emotions and stuff, and you're crafting this person into the story that you're telling. How is it for you of kind of translating that into a character and making the characters different each time?
I think I think we all have so many different aspects of our own
Yeah,
personality, right? We have the person, that we are, the person we want to be, the person that we hope we're not, we have the person that we are around our friends. We have like the person we are with our family. Everyone's a thousand different people.
yeah,
And I mean, there's that dumb saying, write what you know, but you can only write what you know,
yeah,
and so you can only write who you are on that page. And so um it's just, I think that's the for me that's the most rewarding part, is being able to explore different aspects of your own self on the page. The main character in Crush Depth, Liana, she is my fear. She's my fear manifest. And so in that character I get to explore all the things that scare me. Richard in Denizen, he's the father I wish I would have been if I had kids. There's just he's also very much, Richard was very much me trying to put a front and a strong face on when bad things are happening, and
yeah,
not letting people know, you know, oh, I'm going through a divorce. Oh, something terrible happened, and I'm a physical therapist. So when I see my patients, I can't be a big bummer to them. They're seeing me because they're in pain and they need help from me. I can't go, well, I know your back hurts, but my wife's leaving me, so I can't,
right,
so there was a lot of that. That character was a lot of putting on a mask and being this brave front. um, so my favorite part of writing is characters. My favorite part of writing is characters and dialogue, because I think both things let me attach to the character really strongly, and get at their inner workings and explore stuff that I want to explore. Again, it goes back to that first comic I wrote. It's therapy on a page, and
Mm.
so as much as I can work through my own BS and work through my own traumas and stuff like that, I think it saves me some money from going seeing a counselor or psychiatrist or whatever.
And we benefit from your therapy then. But
Right. Yes.
so
Enjoy my trauma. Like, take it and run with it. And I think, I think we connect to each other through shared pain experiences a lot. You like, if you've had a dog die, everybody knows what that feels like, that moment of being in the vet room and holding on to that, that animal that you've loved for, for me, it was 14 years from when she was a puppy up, and having her stop moving and her body start to go cold. I mean, that like, you have those shared traumas and even if you haven't gone through that, hopefully you can put that in your art in a way that someone can feel that.
yeah,
And so, I don't know. It's important to me that there's some depth to my writing, some depth to my characters. I know it's comic books we're talking about, but comics are, I think, one of the best mediums to tell
yeah,
stories in. It's just you get you get pictures and words, but people can linger over the page. It can go back and look at it again. It's not a movie that's forced to you in a certain amount of time or a TV show that has, back in the day had to write to a commercial break or
right.
whatever. Um, I think it's a really cool way of telling story. It's the way my brain thinks stories just because I was so young when I started reading it. I feel like that's kind of how my brain imprinted on this is how a story comes across. It comes across in comic book form, in still pictures and words that you can read.
Yeah. So, if people are hearing this and they go, I've got to check out some stuff. We mentioned Crush Depth is coming out. FOC for that is when?
Uh, February 24th, so should be a couple weeks still. And
And
it comes out March 19th. Yeah.
and this is gang, it's one that I think you really need to check out. Like we talked about, is it, when you're right, like for example, this story, is this something that you envision a self-contained story? Is this stuff that you write? How do you write like to like do I want to maybe open the door, keep the door open for if we want to continue that?
Right.
How's that?
And some of that has to come with the current state of comics,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We're in a, yeah. And anybody who loves indie comics, please support indie comics the next couple of years. This is going to be a
Yes.
rough ride for indie creators. We've already had publishers cancel series, cancel orders, with Diamond collapsing and,
Yep.
there's not great ways for young, and when I say young, I just mean not experienced
Right.
writers to get their stuff started. And we're going to lose a lot of great voices that are never going to get a chance to tell stories in the next 10-20 years. So we all love our Marvel DC stuff. D, DC and Marvel will survive. They're going to be there, but smaller publishers may not.
Yeah.
So I just really want to encourage people,
Yeah.
to support indie books. Buy one extra indie book a week if you can. If you see something from someone you've read before and you think it's going to be cool, put it on your pull list. Get those issue one orders up because the issue one order is going to pay for the full run usually. And if you get enough issue one orders, you get 5 issues. And so with the current comic landscape, you have to think in 5 issue
Yeah.
stories, but you never want to slam the door on yourself,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, that's where my boy Tim's real good at giving us, oh, this is going to end. If it happens to be super popular, then this would be the next 5 issues.
Right.
There's, I said this a couple of times before, so it's not new news, but there's 5 issues of Resonance sitting in my hard drive that has not been, that stopped after 10 that it goes up to 15, and I know where it would go if it went to 20. You don't
Yeah.
close the door on yourself, and I think what's cool about Mad Cave is they recognize that, and they've done a good job at like, hey, Nottingham was popular, let's do some more of it,
Yeah.
right? And then do Tales of Nottingham and do like spin-offs and stuff. So especially working with Mad Cave, we've had that in mind that um, hey, if they want five more, well, this is where this could go, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, gang, I highly recommend putting this on your pull list, checking out some of the previous stuff that you've worked on, Dave. I hesitate to ask because we're pushing your book Crush Depth from Mad Cave here, but are you working on anything else? What else you got coming up and that you can talk about, or can you?
Nothing's been announced.
Okay.
But we will have one more Mad Cave book at least after this. I definitely would love to keep working with Mad Cave, Mark London and Mark Irwin and Mike Martz and James Emmett, our editor. Everybody at Mad Cave is awesome. They're such rad people. And if you are go to a con, go harass them at the booth, go talk to them, pick up other Mad Cave books. They're pretty outstanding, incredible people. And I think what's really, really cool is with the popularity of their IPs, their licensed comics. They don't have to do indie comics right now. Indie comics are probably still losing them. Not to say, they're probably losing a little bit of money with their indie comics. They're making, with Speed Racer and all the other stuff they have with Dick Tracy and all the other stuff they have. I mean, yeah, they're doing fine with that stuff. Whichever I don't know if they have Speed Racer. I might have messed that up, but they have
No, I
Gotcha.
think I think it was. Do they have Speed
I
Racer?
don't know if
No,
that or Dynamite.
Dynamite has Speed Racer.
They have Gotchaman. They have Dick
And then
Tracy,
Defenders,
Defenders,
and they got a Phantom
Phantom.
book coming out and
Yes,
free
yeah.
comic book. Yeah, so
They got they got they got tons of
Speed
super
Racer's
cool
Dynamite.
like
Yeah,
yeah licensed comics. Yes,
yeah,
and so like the fact that they still want to do indie comics is awesome
yeah,
because they could do like other companies do and just do licensed comics, right? And right now, that's where the money is in comics. People for some reason are loving this nostalgia. We got a Captain Planet comic coming. We got, of course, like we said, Speed Racer and Dick Tracy. We got all these, Transformers is one of the biggest comics out right now.
one in Eisner for best series.
I'm
You've got
like,
Space
Transformers has
Ghost,
been around since the 80s, kids. So they've
right?
had comics this whole time. But,
GI
Daniel,
Joe talking bringing back
yes,
Skybound. Like,
right. I mean, Skybound knows how to do that stuff. If anybody's going to do it right, Skybound's going to do it, and that's their first real, licensed IPs, right?
yeah,
So they did it right. So that's where the money is being pushed in comics right now, and so it would be really easy to say, well, we're going to cut back on all these indie comics from a bunch of writers and artists that people don't know that well and they're new titles so they don't sell like a licensed comic sells, but they're not. So I'd love to keep working for Mad Cave,
yeah,
so we got at least one more book coming out for them. um Talks with we haven't another book that will be out early 2026, me and Tim, with a different publisher that we have not worked with yet before. So that's about all I'll say on
all
that one.
right, all right,
And then hopefully have some more vault stuff. I got to get back to, my vault roots and hang out with the Wassels and do some stuff with uh the people that gave me my first chance.
yeah,
They didn't have to take a chance on me. I was a nobody with no real credits and you know I think that's the great thing about indie comics is you can watch somebody go from their first little thing and sometimes they catch fire
Mhm.
and then sometimes they just keep on working like me and hopefully eventually something breaks through.
Well, David, I've enjoyed all the stuff that I've gotten to read of yours. Where can people follow along with you and stay up to date with what you're working on?
I'm mostly on Bluesky right now, at DB Andry. Also on Instagram at DB Andry. I have a website that I will probably never, ever, ever update. But you can like it's people can email me, and so far it's just people wanting to fix my website. So go to dbandry.com and leave a message, and I'll be all, what the hell's going on? There's somebody left me a message on my website.
Or if you want to fix websites, apparently that's the way
Right.
to
If you
go.
want to run my website for free, because I can't afford to pay you. And then yeah, mostly on Bluesky right now.
Yeah.
My DMs are always open. I'm willing to talk to people. Probably have a Kickstarter. We did a Kickstarter with my buddy Chris Alvarez a couple years ago. Now for a comic called Dead Blood, which is like a '90s homage, like big guns and pouches and stuff. You know, we were both kids of the '90s comics, so it's our love letter to '90s comics. It's not like a satire or spoof. It's just like this is the kind of comic we would have made if we were making comics in the '90s.
So good.
So he's working on a second issue right now. So hopefully we'll have a Kickstarter later this year.
That's-
Yeah. So yeah, follow me on Blue Sky. Don't follow me on Twitter anymore. I'm just keeping that open so no one impersonates me.
Right.
And I do have people that I still like DM and stuff on Twitter. That's like, you know,
It's it's one of those you're still trying and find the ways that you can still keep those lines of communication open sometimes that you've had and created. So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
I get it.
mean, a big part about being an indie creator is trying to self-promote, man, because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of promotion money in comics, and there's no, commercials for it or
Nope.
whatever. So it's all word of mouth. So that's my other request to listeners is that if you love an indie comic, tell somebody about it. Buy one extra indie comic a week and tell somebody about your favorite indie comics.
Yes.
And because let me tell you, the word of mouth is huge. Like we talked about at the beginning, Bruce and Stephanie, like I'm sure Resonant's success had to do with them banging the drum 1,000 times, because I know every single person on their stream eventually was browbeaten into buying something Resonant because they would not let it go. Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, and I love hearing recommendations from other people. There's so many comics out there, and if I have somebody who I trust who tells me, "Hey, this is good," I 100% go and buy it. So I love personal recommendations. So do that for other people and spread the love.
Absolutely. Well, David, it's so good that we actually got to connect face to face, virtually at least.
Yes.
And I look forward to continuing to have conversations and chat with you. But gang, go out, put Crush Depth on your FOC order. If you have a pull list, get it. Go support stuff. Check out some other things that from David that we've talked about on this show. But with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.